Okay, here's a little video sort of demonstrating how you can use the feedback loop on the DD-500 to control the character of delay oscillations. So with the DD-500, I absolutely love it to bits. I think it's amazing, apart from the delay oscillations, particularly on the analog mode. They don't sound as good to me as some other pedals out there. And so here's a little demonstration. I've got a kind of loop on the DD8 here. And in the second half of the loop, I'm going to turn up the feedback and careful with your ears. Let's see what it sounds like. So patch A, and I'll start the loop. So hopefully that didn't blow your ears out. As you can hear, it gets very loud, very distorted, and very uncontrollable very quickly. So here's what I've figured out. You could take a compressor pedal and you can plug it into the feedback loop on the DD-500. So the way that we do this is we switch the main output of the DD-500 to output B. So I'll just connect output B to this reverb pedal next to it. And then output A goes to the input of whatever pedal you want to put into the loop. And then input B on the DD-500 connects to the output of that pedal. So then, and I'm sorry you can't see this, you just have to take my word for it, we come into system on the DD-500 and we turn the feedback loop parameter on, and then we come out. And then in addition to that, you have to come up to the bank option in the edit menu, and there's a preference here called FB loop cell, so feedback loop selection, and your options are off, patch A, patch B. And I'm going to choose patch A, and that means that the feedback loop will apply to patch A. Now, if we turn my compressor on and we do the same sort of thing, you'll hear that the character of the delay is markedly different. So, as you can hear, it's much more controlled, much more pleasant to listen to, not as distorted, just better, in my opinion. Now, what's happening here is because the compressor is in the feedback loop, every time the signal loops around, i.e. for every echo, it goes through the compressor, comes back into the DD-500, and just keeps going around and around in a loop like that. And so every echo gets progressively more and more compressed, so that translates as a lot lower volume output and a much more squashed dynamic. You can actually hear that eventually you get this almost kind of pulsating effect that happens. Let me do it again. And because of the nature of the DD-500, we have some control over the final output level of that using the effect level. So we can kind of build up these paddy washes that can sound quite unique depending on what you play into them. And then we could play over the top. And I'm not going to play over the top just because I'm using a looper pedal here and my guitar's on the other side of the room, but just to demonstrate the control over the effect level. So you can kind of think of your effect level as a return level at this point. If I bring the effect level back up, you can hear that texture's just carrying on. So if I had an expression pedal plugged into the DD-500, I could control the effect level. I could equally just control the feedback, that's actually how I would personally use this live. But I think that's quite cool. And of course, you can get different sounds by playing with the pedals that are in the feedback loop. So why don't we try that? I'll probably turn down the output and crank up the sensitivity. This is an MXR Dyna comp. It's a very simple compressor, but let's see what we can do. So you can hear there we have a very different type of oscillation just by changing the output level and the sensitivity. We can even use the tone knob on the DD-500 to sort of control the final tone. And if we came into the patch and we turned on the EQ and we also put that in the feedback loop, we've then got a full EQ that we can play with. So maybe I don't know, maybe we want to do this, but I want to take out some of those high frequency rings. So maybe 1.25 kilohertz, and we'll just take out 8 dB. But because it's in the feedback loop, it will take out 8 dB every time an echo loops back around. Let's see what that sounds like. So there we have a much more throbby, low frequency oscillation, but still with all that nice analog Bucket Brigade crunch. We can even tweak the EQ as things are looping around. So if I boost 1.25 kilohertz instead, we get these washes that start happening. Until it eventually becomes noise. Now, if we add some reverb to that as a final thing, and I will set the high frequency to just boost by, say, 2 dB every sort of time it loops around, and I'll open up the Q so it's a little wider, but I'll set the high cut to be 6.3K, and that should chop off a lot of the extreme highs. This is actually an effect that I use in 2 of our songs, one called Truth Escapes and one called The World Inside, where with my Line 6 Helix I actually ramp up the feedback on the Adriatic delay on that unit. Now, the Adriatic delay is actually a modified analog Bucket Brigade delay, kind of like a Boss DM2, I suppose. And what I'm doing here is emulating how that effect sounds, and this is very close. It does involve another pedal, and it does involve some more cabling and a little finagling to get the tone, but it absolutely works. So the other thing I'd like to do, or at least finish off with, is I'll do the kind of classic change the delay time thing whilst it's oscillating, and we'll see what that sounds like. So, spaceship noises definitely can be had in the DD-500. In my opinion, by itself, they sound too loud and too chaotic. But if you put a compressor in the feedback loop, you can add that control for yourself. Some caveats. When you do this, your initial sort of feedback value will most likely need to be a lot lower than you're expecting, because this compressor is always active even when you're not doing the oscillation. So what that means is even if you just want a kind of slapback thing, or you want just a regular quarter note delay or a triplet or whatever, if you raise the feedback parameter too high, then it will just start feeding back, because the level's being compressed and boosted every single time. You'll see, even with no signal going through it, if I turn up the feedback, it will start oscillating. Let me turn that reverb off. Because obviously what's happening is the noise floor of the entire setup, the noise coming from your source and the noise of the cables and everything else, is being compressed and then boosted by the Dynacomp. So usually, or typically, you would want your feedback to basically be 0, so that it never gets a chance to kind of build up and escalate. And you might be able to get away with a little more. Say, yeah, even when you set the value to 10, it's still going to start that oscillation behavior. So ideally, you want this feedback knob on an expression pedal so that you can control that. But anyway, I think this is quite a cool little approach. And for me, it gets me the tone of my multi-effect unit without being tied to that multi-effect unit. I could pretty much do this with any delay that offers a feedback loop or a insert feature. So I hope that was useful and inspiring. Thanks very much.